Well, thank you, Grayson. And for those of you that are here today, I want to commend you for your competitiveness to be here. And for all of those who aren't here today, who we're still speaking to through the recordings that we're going to make of this session, we're sorry you're not here, but you're here in spirit, and hopefully this session will actually be a contribution to the purpose of this organization and to the goals and aspirations that we all have for the community and for the society in which we live. I think we're at a time when we're sort of recalibrating the role of business and the boundaries of that role. Traditionally, businesses have said, well, my job is to go out there and make a profit. And that's a pretty important contribution. If I make a profit, I can buy stuff, and I can pay my workers and provide jobs and pay taxes, and that's my role. And many business leaders actually still think that way. But I think what we're coming to understand is that we're in an era where I think we have to rethink that role, that traditional role of business. We understand that business is the foundation of all prosperity. Only business can create wealth in society by making a profit, by meeting a need at a profit. But we also understand that we're living in a time of history that is really characterized most vividly by a whole array of societal problems and challenges. Problems of health, problems of the environment, problems of poverty and inequality, and so many other areas of which we're now increasingly aware. One of the things about this moment in history that I think is very, very unique is the incredible awareness of societal needs and societal problems today that we really never had before. They were always there, but today I think they're so visible. And particularly young people today have a completely different perspective on these problems than we may have had before. What we're also starting to realize is that the traditional institutions for dealing with societal problems and meeting societal needs, that's government and the nonprofit community, really are struggling. There's just not enough resources for those institutions to meet all the needs that they're being asked to meet. Government budgets all over the world are being squeezed. NGOs that depend on donations are facing greater and greater challenges in funding their activities. And at the same time, I think we in business have been approached now to an increasing degree and really asked to be engaged. In fact, many in our society today are actually questioning whether business is actually creating some of these problems that society is facing. And business is under attack in many quarters. The trust in business has been declining over the last decades. Now, in response to that, I think many businesses are doing more than ever before. There are many efforts at social responsibility, many efforts for businesses to get engaged in the community in a whole variety of ways. But ironically, the more of this we do in business, and it's going up every year, the more of it we do, the less legitimacy we seem to have. So I think what I've come to believe is that we really have to step back and ask ourselves, is there a better approach to dealing with all these societal challenges than the path we're on? And this topic has been one that I've been spending increasing amounts of time thinking about over the last few years. And I'd like to kind of share with you some of what I've learned, what I've seen, and suggest that this is a way of thinking that I think if we can get on a different path, we can have a profound impact. We can actually change the direction. Many of these problems we face in society today, which seem so intractable, actually I think we can solve. But we're going to have to solve them in a very different way than we've been trying to solve them historically. Now, the traditional way in which business engages inside society and social issues including economic development, is the model of philanthropy. We make donations to worthy organizations that are working on important societal problems. We volunteer our time, we volunteer our people's time. This was really the first wave of business impact or attempts to impact social challenges. The high water mark in corporate philanthropy really goes back actually a couple of decades. The leading company of its era was what now has become Target. They pledged to give 5% of their pre-tax profits every year to corporate philanthropy. And a number of other companies adopted that 5% rule. That was kind of the high water mark of the movement that corporate philanthropy was the right approach. Now, corporate philanthropy is good. Hope all of you are doing it. You'll continue to do it. We need business to make philanthropic contributions. We need business to give back. We need ourselves as individuals to be philanthropic and give back. But I think what we've learned is that if you're brutally honest about it, corporate philanthropy alone rarely solves these problems. It makes an impact, we make things better, but typically what business finds itself doing is giving lots of money to lots of worthy causes. There's so many worthy causes. But that money ultimately doesn't solve the problem. It may make things better, but ultimately it's not a solution. Why? Because there's only so much that business can give. There's only so much that shareholders will tolerate business to give. And this is not, this is a step forward, but it's not a solution. So as we started to recognize the limits of corporate philanthropy, I think the next stage in the evolution of thinking on this topic really locked in on this notion of corporate social responsibility. This is a much broader issue than just philanthropy. It's not only about continuing to do some philanthropic donations, but it's really about compliance with community standards and with standards of ethics and values that are appropriate for a business. Many businesses had shortcomings and weaknesses in this area. It's a matter of being a good corporate citizen, of not just giving money, but engaging and participating in organizations like this, which is part of corporate social responsibility. It's this notion of sustainability, that we in business have a responsibility to think about the long term and make sure that we're not degrading resources, natural resources and the environment and other important issues in our efforts to make returns and grow our business. And this corporate social responsibility movement has grown and grown and grown and really become a major effort of many companies. I'm sure all of you in this room have social responsibility programs. Every day I get corporate social responsibility reports from company after company after company, chronicling all the good deeds that they're doing, all the harms that they're reducing, all the recycling programs that they've created, and that's great. That was a great step forward. I think it sensitized a lot of companies to the perhaps unwitting impacts that they were having in the community through the way they did things, and there's been much improvement. But once again, I think we've come to understand that although we've got to keep doing this, we've got to keep finding ways to be a good citizen. We've got to keep finding ways to mitigate, harms that perhaps we were unwittingly creating. Again, that's unlikely to be a solution to the problems that we have in society, all these problems I talked about earlier. And increasingly, we're starting to see that there's actually another chapter in how we think about our role in business. And ironically, this chapter, I think that we're starting to see, in a sense, is where business ultimately started. But as we've gotten more sophisticated in business, as we've gotten more analytical, as we've gotten more, focused on optimization and supply chain management and all these ideas that have taught us how to be more productive businesses, we've lost sight of, in some ways, our most powerful role as business in society, and that's as a business itself. And that leads to an idea that we have coined creating shared value. I mean, you can give money to worthy social causes, and that's good. You can have a very holistic understanding of how to exercise your responsibility as a corporation and mitigate harm and be a good citizen, and that's good. But the most profound impact that any business can have on society is through the business itself. If we can, through our businesses, whatever those businesses are, if we can actually influence directly societal issues, whether they be environment or health or safety or whatever that issue is, that's where our real power comes from. Because if we can address a societal problem or societal need through the business itself with a business model in making a profit at the same time, we have magic. See, social responsibility, if you want to do more, you have to invest more. Philanthropy, if you want to do more, you have to give more. But if we can address issues like inadequate savings or the inadequate use of energy, if we can address those problems through the business, with a business model, of course what happens is magical because we can scale. It's self-sustaining. If we can solve a problem for 5 people this way, we can solve it for 5 million people or 500 million people. So what we're starting to understand is the most powerful way to address these societal problems is actually to start to rethink how we can affect them through our businesses rather than on the side. The traditional effort is we do our business and then on the side we do these other things. But as we're understanding more and more how to really address societal needs, the more we're starting to understand that actually if we can address them through the business, that's where our real power lies. But of course, the ability to address these issues through our business is going to depend on our particular business. If we're a financial services company like Regions, we're going to have certain societal issues that we directly affect, but many that we don't touch. If we're, UAB or Alabama Power, we're going to have a different set of issues in society that we can address. The challenge in creating shared value is not sort of a generic approach. The challenge is to find in our business, given our assets, given our skills, given our capabilities, what are those areas that we can really affect? And you know what the funny thing about this is that what we're finding in industry after industry and sector after sector is if we can think this way, we open up a whole new universe of opportunities for growth, for innovation, and for actually driving our business. Isn't it surprising that the greatest business opportunities come from dealing with the social problems, not business as usual? This is the opportunity we have. This is the era we're in. And let me give you some examples. The opportunity here comes from the fact that almost every societal problem we can identify actually has an opportunity for the business to make an impact and actually to benefit the business at the same time. We used to think, for example, that environmental issues were only a cost to business. That if we had environmental standards and if we tried to improve our environmental performance, this would cost more money. If we were going to reduce pollution, that's expensive. And that same mentality is applied to so many issues. Worker safety. We used to think that worker safety was something that we could only afford to do so much of. We've been complaining about health care cost and saying that, the business can't afford to invest too much in health insurance because it's going to hurt us. The more we've learned, though, about issue after issue after issue, the more we've learned that actually it's backwards. Actually, what we've learned is that if we have poor environmental performance, that's a sign of poor technology, poor processes, wasted resources, and an opportunity to substantially improve our productivity. We've learned that actually the way to think about health of our employees is not how much we're spending on the health benefits, but what the cost of poor health actually is. And what we've learned is that the cost of poor health among your employee population is actually 3 times the cost of the health benefits. So skimping on health benefits and not paying attention to the health of your employees is the stupidest idea that any business has ever thought of. Instead, they ought to be the opposite. We ought to be thinking about how we can deploy new ideas and new programs to help our employees be healthier. And in the process, actually make our business more productive and more efficient and more profitable. What we find is social issue after social issue, if we think about it the right way, and if we take into account the latest ideas, we understand that there's actually a fundamental synergy between societal problems and business success. Because when we have a societal problem like poorly educated workers or inadequate infrastructure, actually that societal problem actually creates a cost for the business. If we have a really important social need out there that isn't being met, whether it's for health or clean products or nutritious food, that social need actually is often the biggest possible business opportunity we can imagine. And it's this thinking about societal needs and societal problems through the shared value lens, rather than the philanthropy lens or the social responsibility lens, that is opening up transformational opportunities for innovation and growth in business. So let's look at some opportunities. There's really 3 ways in which any business can create shared value. Address a societal issue in a way in which it actually enhances the economic value creation of the business. Number 1 is the product, through the product. If we can create products that actually address these important societal problems, whether they're health or nutrition or energy or safety or low-income populations, we unlock opportunities for the business. We create differentiation for our products. If we can find customers that have been left out, that are underserved, we unlock growth for the business. In Regions Bank, we talk a lot about the fact that 25% of all American households really is underbanked or unbanked. There's the growth opportunity. Yes, it's a societal problem. These are people that don't have a financial relationship, they don't have adequate savings, they don't have a checking account. But instead of seeing that as a social issue, Regions is starting to understand that that's fundamentally a business issue. And it's a tremendous opportunity for growing that business. The pharmaceutical industry in America has realized that by ignoring the emerging world and ignoring low-income populations, they've actually made their business mature. But by opening up their thinking to providing life-saving drugs to lower-income populations, by the way, which requires a different business model, all of a sudden, pharma is a growth industry again. And in sector after sector after sector, we're seeing that opportunity. We're seeing that the real growth opportunity is not this doing the same thing, the same old products for the same old customers with the same mindset about how we're meeting needs, but it's opening up our thinking about who the customer is, about what the real needs are in our business. That's level 1. Level 2 has to do with our value chains, how we operate, how we produce, how we market, how we distribute, how we sell, how we utilize our employees, and we're learning that there's a whole better way of running a value chain, of structuring a value chain. And the clues to how to do that come from societal issues. Consumption of energy, intensity of logistics, utilization of resources and packaging and water. We never thought about those things. But ultimately, the more attention we've paid to these sort of social type questions in how we go about production and distribution and marketing, the more we've understood that there's a whole new, more productive way of doing things that we really hadn't thought of. Companies like Walmart are saving billions of dollars a year on reducing the use of energy, which, by the way, reduces the climate impacts. And that's not charity. that's a gigantic business opportunity they completely overlooked because we didn't think this way. We didn't think about resource utilization. We didn't think about how much packaging we really needed. We didn't think about how much waste we were sending to the landfill. But those areas which often come from important societal challenges give us clues about ways in which we can make ourselves more fundamentally efficient and effective. And if companies started to look at it that way, they've unlocked huge opportunities. And then the third level of shared value is very much the kind of thing that we're all doing here today at this BBA annual meeting. We're engaging our companies in local and regional business development and competitiveness and economic development. But the traditional thinking about the role of business and economic development is we have to be good corporate citizens. I think increasingly, though, we're understanding that business's role in economic development is actually very fundamental to the business's success. By making sure that we have the right employees that we would love to hire, by making sure that we have the right infrastructure available, by making sure that we have the right supplier base and supporting industries that allow us to be efficient and productive. This is the shared value opportunity. This is the opportunity that we're finding is driving so much innovation and change in industry after industry if we can rethink this role of business differently. So let's talk about a few examples that might bring this concept to life. Here's a company, Dow Chemical. We've all heard of Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical is a marvelous, high-tech innovation company in the area of chemistry and related technologies. They pride themselves on innovation and breakthroughs. But some years ago, their senior management said, wait a minute, we're kind of using all this technological expertise we have to focus on kind of the same old things. And the CEO did something very interesting. He said, look, I want every business unit to look at the Millennium Development Goals. You know what those are? The Millennium Development Goals are the kind of most important development priorities facing the world. And the CEO said, I want every business unit to figure out how you can use your technological expertise to deal with one of the most important problems in society. Let's not just do the same old incremental improvement in our chemical products that we've been doing in the past. Let's think that way about it. And here's an example of just one of the divisions, and by the way, many of the divisions did this, that actually came up with a whole new product area in the area of agricultural seeds that had a profound impact on health, on the utilization of land in farming, which is a scarce resource that we desperately need to use better because of the problems of food supply going forward. And out of this comes a business that, as of 2012, was a $700 million business. It's one of the biggest product ideas they've ever had. How did they figure out the idea? They figured it out not by thinking about how can we improve the product a little bit incrementally. They thought about, how can we use our expertise to meet a really important unmet societal need? And out of that popped a major business. Again, at Regions, we talk a lot about that, about opportunities as a financial services provider to really tackle real issues in the society and in the community, like affordable housing. We could be philanthropic and we could build houses on weekends, part of Habitat for Humanity. That's a good thing to do. But what if instead we figured out how to finance efficient, new, affordable, and mixed-use housing projects? Wouldn't that have a profound effect on affordable housing? And wouldn't that be a way we could scale and really solve that problem? We can only volunteer so much. We can only build so many houses on weekends. But if we can actually get the market working, if we can get capitalism working, then this problem can be ultimately solved, or we can imagine solving it. That's shared value. In the area of the value chain, here's a company we all know well, Intercontinental Hotel Group, and they started asking themselves, okay, let's look at our value chain. What resources and societal challenges do we affect? And of course, they selected energy use. as an important area where they actually had a substantial part of their cost base was the energy required to kind of operate their facilities all over the world. And there were some lesser issues that you see on the slide. And instead of having a check-the-box energy reduction campaign so that they could put it in their CSR report, they said, wait a minute, let's use all of our talent and all of our expertise to see if we can fundamentally use energy more efficiently. And we're not doing that to be good guys, and we're not doing that to be charitable, and we're not doing that to check the box in our CSR report. We're doing that because it's going to drive our economic efficiency as well. And you can see here they've got amazing improvements by treating it that way. You know, so many of these societal issues like recycling and sending stuff to the landfill and energy use, you know, businesses are trying to do something, but they're treating it as an add-on, as something as part of their CSR report, rather than seeing that we actually, through our business, in our own self-interest, can create shared value, where the society benefits just as much as the business. And this stuff is scalable. We can apply it to every one of the, you know, almost 2,000 intercontinental hotel properties around the world, and we can move the needle with that. We can move the needle, and hopefully our whole industry will do it, and we'll move the needle even more, rather than these little tiny efforts that are really viewed as sort of reputation building, as opposed to the reality of driving our business. In terms of the local business environment, I'll just a little bit of time on this because I think it's so important to this organization. You know, how can we really mobilize this organization to really drive improvement in the Birmingham metropolitan area and in our entire state? And here, I think what we've come to understand is actually that although we need government to do economic development, and we need NGOs in many cases to tackle some of the dimensions of economic development, ultimately, the most powerful force for economic development that has the greatest self-interest in economic development in many cases is actually us in business. Because we depend on a good business environment. We depend on a good supplier base. We depend on efficient logistics. We depend on this stuff. It makes us more productive. If we have it, we're going to be better and more profitable, and we're going to be able to grow faster. It's in our interest to engage directly in this, not out of charity, not just to be a good guy, not to make a donation, you know, to the chamber, but because it actually matters to our business. And we need to find those areas of economic development which are really most important to our businesses, and we need to focus our efforts there because that's where we're going to get the greatest impact and the greatest result. There's also this real critical concept in economic development called clusters. And what's a cluster? A cluster is where you have a critical mass of companies and supporting industries and supporting institutions in the same field in a given location. That's a cluster. This is a cluster in Massachusetts. It's probably the preeminent cluster in the life sciences field in the world. It has to do with teaching hospitals, think tanks, pharma companies, biotech companies, medical device companies, and a lot of associated institutions like intellectual property firms and specialized venture capital, and you see them all on the slide. World-class educational institutions that are providing scientific and medical training in these fields. That's a cluster. And what we find is where you can build a cluster in a particular region, you have explosive opportunities for accelerating economic development. That's where jobs are generated. That's where new businesses sprout up. That's where real innovation takes place. All the data on this is compelling. So when we think about economic development, I think one of the central new ideas that we've come to understand about economic development is we can't just focus on the broad business environment. That's important. We also have to focus on building and energizing our clusters, you know, where we have this critical mass and where we could build an even greater critical mass. Now, if we look at this region where you all live, we see a whole array of clusters. We see the whole metal manufacturing and metal technology cluster here in this region. We see power generation, where we have actually a strong position as a region. We see automotive that is building. We see distribution We see transportation and logistics. These are all areas where the data says that the Birmingham region has a competitive advantage because we started building a cluster. And what we've come to understand is that the most powerful economic development is really where we can really try to accelerate and jumpstart and provide the assets necessary to actually grow these clusters even further. And I think that that leads directly to implications for every company. Every company's got to understand what cluster are we in, who are the other players, what's missing in the business environment for our cluster, kind of what skills are necessary for our cluster, and how can we work collaboratively with others in our field in order to build this region strength in that area. And then it feeds on itself. Once we can start to build an automotive cluster and we get a certain critical mass of companies here, then others want to be part of it. And we find that this kind of accelerates and turbocharges the whole process of economic development. So as we think about how we want to play in economic development, again, the traditional thinking has been very much about corporate responsibility. We've got to be responsible players. But ultimately what we're learning is if we really want to do this successfully, we really need to think about it in terms of shared value. How do we contribute to creating an environment that actually makes us more effective and efficient and gives us opportunities to grow? And in that process of cluster development, we found that there's a profound role for what we call anchor institutions. These are very large organizations. They're often leading companies. They're places like UAB, like Alabama Power, large organizations that are really anchors that have multiple levers with which to affect the cluster and the entire business environment. And this slide just illustrates a whole body of work that's been done on this topic. You know, if you're regions or if you're UAB, how can you really move the needle in economic development in a way that actually makes your company and your institution much more successful in achieving its goals? And again, you're blessed in this region with a number of anchors that have really stepped up to play this role. And organizations I've already mentioned, and there are more as well. Now, very briefly, there's a couple of other kind of key principles in moving from corporate social responsibility to shared value. Another key principle is the notion of partnering. We've got to break down the traditional silos between government and business and NGOs. This region, I think, is blessed with making more progress in that area than in many areas. The traditional relationship between NGOs and business has been very tense. NGOs have seen their job as to highlight issues, challenge business, try to force business to do their job better, often humiliate business. Get business in the newspapers in ways that they don't want to be, trying to get them, to do something. The traditional business-government relationship varies a lot from region to region, but in many areas it's anything but collaborative. It's really about, business wants to be left alone and government wants to, raise more taxes. What we see in a shared value world, we have to understand that actually if what we care about is the real societal needs and problems, economic development, health, water, nutrition, financial literacy, if we really care about the societal problems, we're all on the same page. And all of a sudden, NGOs and businesses that are adversaries become allies. They start working together. They start collaborating in a joint pursuit to actually address the societal issue that they both care about. And it's that mindset that I think is often a little bit hard for both sides to adopt, but we're starting to see many, many examples in this country and around the world. So for those of you here in business, think of the NGOs that have made your life the most miserable, for the last decade or two, and ask yourself, if we actually fundamentally care about the same fundamental societal issues, how can we join forces? And those kind of partnerships are exploding. And governments are increasingly seeing what I think your mayor and your government here has seen, and that is that we really are on the same page. We're not adversaries, and we can collaborate. Now, what this whole shared value perspective says then, that when we approach society as business, we need to approach it in a way that reflects who we are and what our business really is. This is an example from Nestle, one of the largest food companies in the world. And they've understood that there's a lot of ways in which they might be able to be a good corporate citizen, but in terms of really moving the needle in shared value, they've really selected these three areas that you see. That's because of who they are, what their business are, where they source. They source from a lot of small farmers in a lot of rural areas. They've taken this issue on. They're a major water user and a major water company. And they've taken this issue on. And by really focusing their effort, they've been able to achieve really quite a lot of impact. Every one of us in business has to figure out where we really play, where we have opportunities for leverage and impact, and take our diffuse corporate responsibility and philanthropy efforts and try to hone them in on those areas where we can really make a difference and move the needle. Increasingly, what we're finding is that the social dimension is becoming part of all the great strategies. The companies that are really winning in this modern world in which we now live today, where there's this widespread understanding of the complexity and challenges that society is facing, the companies that are winning are the companies that can find a way to integrate this into their strategic thinking. One of the best examples here that we all heard of is Whole Foods, a company which is the quintessential shared value company. They're all about nutrition. They're all about the environment. They're all about local farmers. They're all about that. It's not a window dressing. It's not on the side. It's who they are. It's their strategy. And guess what? It's made them the most economically successful and the most rapidly growing food retail company in North America. There's no conflict between society and a successful company. There's a fundamental alignment, and more companies are starting to understand that alignment. More and more companies are changing their definition of purpose. Who are we, and what do we really do? What is our purpose as a company? Traditionally, companies have thought of their purposes, our purpose is to maximize shareholder value. Well, let me tell you, today's generation of young people isn't interested in that. They don't want to work for that company anymore. If your purpose is just to maximize shareholder value, that's not very enticing. That's not seen as really moving the needle in society. Traditionally, companies have seen their purpose also in terms of the product they produce. We're a financial services company. We're a food company. We're some other kind of company, defined by what they do, what their product is. Increasingly, what we're starting to understand is we have to understand not what our product looks like, but what fundamental societal need we actually can address or are addressing. And this slide just shows a few companies that have kind of made that transformation in terms of thinking about who they are. Nestle, again, is a wonderful example. They don't think of themselves as a food company anymore. That's a product. If you think of yourself as a food company, you define success as selling more food. How do you sell more food? You load it with fat and sugar. And so people eat too much, and then you sell more food. But ultimately now they see that that was the wrong path. Their whole industry was on the wrong path. Instead, they now say, no, we're not a food company. We're a nutrition company. We're a nutrition and wellness company. And all of a sudden, the opportunities for transforming their products, their customers, how they serve the market, how they differentiate, have exploded. And Nestle's in a period of very rapid growth again, because they've understood how to connect who they are to the actual societal needs in which they're meeting. And if you can't find a societal need in which you're meeting, I think that's a pretty substantial challenge for a company. And I think, unfortunately, we have some industries that have that awkward truth, that if you're a company that makes cigarettes, it's a little bit hard to find the societal purpose. And so that kind of tells you that you better do some transformational innovation in order to get your business actually realigned with society. And in financial services, we talk a lot in Regions about how historically we thought our job was to sell more financial services. Even maybe if many financial services companies sold people services they didn't really need, or sold them financial services that actually depended on that weren't actually fundamentally good for the customer, like a loan that they actually couldn't pay back. But if we think of our fundamental purpose as actually providing the tools and the products to allow families to succeed in building a financial future for their family, then all of a sudden we're anchored on not only the right thing to do, but also the thing that's going to allow us to build a sustainable and growing business. So let me just, given the time, kind of conclude here. I think we are in a period where we have to start to see ourselves and our role in business differently. I think we've been caught up historically in thinking of ourselves as really fundamentally about the shareholder. I think to the extent that we've seen our role as having a social role, we've seen that role primarily through these lenses of philanthropy and social responsibility. But I think actually that traditional lens that we've been using is actually reduced our awareness of some of our greatest business opportunities. We're in a very exciting period now where companies across many, many fields are starting to rethink this view, seeing their role as fundamentally around creating shared value. And as I say there, business acting as a business, not as a charitable giver, is the most powerful way in which we can change society's problems into opportunities in which we can actually solve problems. And we've got to start seeing ourselves this way, and we've got to start looking for ways in which we can, in our business, given who we are, given what societal needs we really affect, we can actually make this transformation. It's very exciting to me to get to know this community, to get to know the degree to which there is actually a shared commitment to the Birmingham region. There's a tremendous public-spirited business community here. I think we have some amazing potential strengths. I think if we can make this leap from social responsibility to really thinking of our role as creating shared value, I think we have a very exciting future indeed. So I thank you for being here under difficult circumstances, and I hope we'll have a chance to continue this discussion many more times, and hopefully this region will start to see accelerated progress. I think there's already good signs, but I think there's a much better future on the way. Thank you very much.